In this video, we will discuss how to design and use a questionnaire. Putting together a questionnaire seems very easy at first sight. Actually, however, it involves a lot of skill and expertise. If the questionnaire is badly designed, then it directly affects the quality of the data gathered. Designing a questionnaire involves a series of systematic steps, each of which are interrelated. Before the questions themselves are developed, the researcher makes a mental review of how the questions are going to be structured. There are basically two types of question formats: close-ended and open-ended. Close-ended questions have a fixed and limited number of response alternatives. So for example, to a question as to why a certain brand is preferred, the close-ended questions would list a limited number of alternatives such as price, quality, brand name, etc. In contrast, open-ended questions do not provide any alternatives and instead expect respondents to frame their response as they wish. Typically, the interviewer asks follow-up questions that requires the respondents to clarify and elaborate on their open-ended answers. Let us now take a look at questionnaire organization. So, questionnaire organization is the sequence or flow of statements and questions that make up a questionnaire. The arrangement of questions and the ease with which respondents complete the questions have potential to affect the quality of the information that is gathered. The introduction, the first part of the questionnaire is of critical importance. The introduction gives an idea about who is doing the survey, what is the survey about, how are the participants selected, as well as the anonymity and confidentiality of responses. Another crucial aspect of questionnaire organization is the question flow. So questions should be organized in a logical or common sense progression. So the first few questions are typically screening questions to determine whether the potential respondent qualifies to participate in the survey based on certain selection criteria. The next few questions typically serve as warm-up questions. So they are simple and easy to answer questions that are used to get the respondents interested, to get inside the survey and to be little more involved. Transitions are statements or questions that are used to let the respondents know that there will be a change in question format, question topic, or question format that are about to happen. So a statement such as, now I would like to ask you a few questions about your TV viewing habits is an example of a transition statement. It kind of gives the respondent a heads up about the questions that are going to follow. The middle of the questionnaire consists of relatively complicated and difficult to answer questions. So this is the meat of the questionnaire. So for example, there can be questions such as rate each of the following stores on the friendliness of the salespeople on a scale of 1 to 7. So this is a little more involved questions which makes the respondents think and analyze and then answer. The rationale in having these questions at this point is that the respondent has committed himself or herself to complete the questionnaire so that they don't drop out. And also they can see that there are not many questions left, so they kind of stick with it and to complete the survey. There is the drop-off rate is significantly reduced when we load these important questions in the middle or rather a little later in the questionnaire rather than upfront. The final section of the questionnaire is reserved for classification questions. So which includes demographic questions to classify respondents into area groups for the purpose of analysis. For instance, the researcher may want to classify respondents into categories based on age, gender, income level, and so on. The placement of classification questions as these at the end of the questionnaire is useful because some respondents will consider certain demographic questions as being too personal and may refuse to give answers. There is also the issue of question bias. Now, special effort is taken to minimize question bias. Question bias is defined as the ability of the question wording or format to influence respondents' answers. So a single word can make a difference in how respondents respond to a question. For example, researchers in one study took two groups of subjects to view a picture of a car for a few seconds. Both groups were then asked the same question, but in one group, a single word was changed in the question. So one group was asked, "Did you see the broken headlight?" Another group was asked, "Did you see a broken headlight?" So the difference was in one group, it was the "Did you see the broken headlight?" and "Did you see a broken headlight?" None, another. So it was seen that the question that contained contained the word "the" produced more "don't knows" and "yes" answers. Thus, even one word in a question can result in question bias that will distort the survey findings. Now we come to the issue of developing the questions themselves. This is a very carefully calibrated skill and activity, and so there are certain do's and don'ts involved in developing questions. So let's take a look at what are some of the do's of question wording. So the first do is the question should be clear. The question should be focused on a single issue or topic and avoid vague wordings. Thus, for instance, instead of asking, "When do you typically go to work?" the question is better framed as, "At what time do you ordinarily leave for work?" So when you ask, "When do you typically go to work?" it may confuse respondents as to whether the question is about the time of departure from home for work or the actual time that he or she begins work once at the workplace. The next point is the question should be brief. So unnecessary and redundant words should always be eliminated. This requirement is especially important when designing questions that will be administered verbally, such as over the telephone. So brevity and conciseness will help the respondent comprehend the central question and reduce the distraction of wordiness. So it has to be very carefully worded and scripted so that it's not too wordy or too verbose. The question also should be grammatically simple. So a simple sentence is preferred. With more conditions to remember, the respondent's attention may wane and he or she may concentrate on only one part of the question. So take the question, if you were looking for an automobile that would be used by the head of your household, who is primarily responsible for driving children to and from school, music lessons, and friends' houses, how would you and your spouse discuss the safety feature of one car that you took for a test drive? So a much simpler question would be, would you and your spouse discuss the safety feature of a new family car? Followed by, if yes, would you discuss safety? Very little, some, a good deal, or to a great extent. Some maybe a 5-point Likert scale to rate your response. So it should be very simple, direct, and nothing doesn't have too many conditions worked into it. Finally, the question should be crystal clear. it is best to avoid words that are imprecise or open to misinterpretation. For example, the question, how many children do you have, is unclear, but it can be interpreted in various ways. One respondent might think of only those children living at home, whereas another might include children from a previous marriage. Better question would be, how many children under age of 18 live with you in your home? That is much more crystal clear, much more focused, and leaves nothing to confusion. Now that we have discussed what to do while framing questions, let us also take a look at all the things that we should avoid while framing questions. So as a general rule, questions should not be leading, loaded, double-barreled, or overstated. So let us discuss each of these elements. So the first one is, do not lead the respondent to a particular answer. So a leading question gives strong cue or expectation as to what answer to provide. Therefore, it biases responses. For example, the question, "Don't you worry when using your credit card for online purchases," suggests to the respondent that one should worry while using credit cards in online transactions. Rephrasing the question as, "Do you have concerns when using the credit card for online purchases?" is a much more objective request of the respondent. Another best practice is not to use loaded wording or phrasing. Whereas leading questions are typically obvious, loaded questions are stealthy. For example, the question, "If navigation systems were shown to help us decrease our depletion of world oil reserves, would you purchase one?" is an example of a loaded question. Instead, the improved question should be, how much do you think an automobile navigation system might save you on gasoline? The third don't of question designing is to avoid double-barreled questions. The double-barreled question is really two different questions posed in one question, so they are compressed. With two questions blended together, it is difficult for a respondent to answer either one directly. For example, consider a question asked of a patron at a restaurant. Were you satisfied with the restaurant's food and service? Now, this question actually has two separate components, one on satisfaction with the food, and the other is the satisfaction with the service, but they are compressed and made to appear as one question. So this is an example of what we call a double-barreled question. Finally, do not use words that overstate the case. An overstated question places undue emphasis on some aspect of the topic. For example, a survey conducted for Ray-Ban sunglasses asked, "How much do you think you would pay for a pair of sunglasses that will protect your eyes from the sun's harmful ultraviolet rays, which are known to cause blindness?" Here, the overstatement concerns the effect of ultraviolet rays, and respondents may be compelled to think about how much they would pay for something that can prevent blindness and not about how much they would really pay for sunglasses. Thus, a more toned down question would be, how much would you pay for sunglasses that will protect your eyes from the sun's glare? It is better to present the question in a neutral tone rather than in a strongly positive or a strongly negative tone. We now come to the final stage of finalizing the questionnaire. So the final two stages of questionnaire designing are coding and pre-testing the questionnaire. Coding the questionnaire involves assigning code numbers. The codes are numbers associated with questions responses. So this facilitates data entry and analysis. So the primary objective of coding is to represent each possible response with a unique number, because numbers are easier and faster to use in computer tabulation programs such as SPSS or Tableau. So some of the rules for questionnaire coding are: first, every closed-ended question should have a code number associated with every possible responses. So this is this is a must, especially in a closed-ended question. And also, it is essential to use the same coding system for questions with identical response options, regardless of where these questions are positioned in the questionnaire. So whether it is at the top of the question, middle of the question, towards the end, the coding system for question with identical response options should be the same. So it should be, if there are 4 responses, if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, then the same coding system should be followed throughout the questionnaire, not A, B, C, D, or some other codes. Once the questionnaire is developed, it should be pre-tested. So a pre-test involves conducting a dry run of the survey on a small representative set of respondents. To these reveal questionnaire errors before the survey is launched. And pre-test participants should be representative of the target population under study. So before the questions are administered, participants are informed of the pre-test, and their cooperation is requested in spotting words, phrases, instructions, question flows, or other aspects of the questionnaire that appear confusing, maybe difficult to understand, or otherwise problematic. Normally, between 5 to 10 respondents are involved in the pre-test, and the researcher looks for common problem themes across this group. So because researchers can never completely replicate the respondent's perspective, a pre-test is extremely valuable. So a pre-test is an essential part of questionnaire administration. Before it is actually administered, a pre-test run is essential.